Look around the room you're sitting in right now. There's probably a non-stick pan in your kitchen, maybe a scented candle on a shelf, a carpet under your feet, a plastic container in your fridge. None of these things look dangerous. They're ordinary. Nobody thinks twice about them. But research suggests something is happening underneath that surface. Some of these ordinary objects may be quietly changing your body at a cellular level, not through a sudden symptom, through a slow nudge toward faster biological aging. This isn't a story about a chemical spill somewhere far away. It's not about contaminated water in some other town. It's about substances already inside almost all of us, right now, delivered through cooking dinner, through lighting a candle, through sitting on your own couch. Let's start with the chemicals that earned the most unsettling nickname in modern science: forever chemicals. Their real name is PFAS. That stands for per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It's a family of thousands of man-made compounds. They were built to resist things: water, oil, heat, stains. That's exactly why they ended up in non-stick pans, in waterproof jackets, in stain-resistant carpets and furniture, in some food packaging, even in certain cosmetics. The same bond that makes them repel water and oil also makes them nearly impossible to break down. They don't degrade in the environment on any human timescale. They don't fully break down in your body either. Once they're in, they tend to stay, sometimes for years. For a long time, the PFAS conversation focused on things like cholesterol and certain cancers. But newer research asks a different question. Does long-term exposure actually speed up aging itself? Not aging you can feel, aging you can measure, at the level of your DNA. A study published in early 2026 looked at exactly this. It used a large, nationally representative sample of American adults. The researchers measured something called epigenetic aging. This is a way of estimating biological age, not how many birthdays you've had, how old your cells actually behave, based on chemical markers on your DNA. Two PFAS compounds stood out. They're called PFNA and PFOSA. Researchers found them in the blood of roughly 95% of participants. Sit with that number for a second. This isn't a rare exposure affecting a small, unlucky group. It's present in nearly everyone tested. The bigger finding was this: these compounds were linked to faster biological aging. The effect showed up most strongly in men between 50 and 64. Researchers point to a familiar mechanism: oxidative stress, chronic low-grade inflammation, the same damage that shows up again and again in aging research, from heart disease to the cellular dysfunction we've covered before on this channel. Here's the part that connects directly to your kitchen. Non-stick cookware is one of the most common sources of PFAS exposure in an average home. Older pans are worse. Scratched pans are worse. High heat makes it worse too. Researchers studying food contact materials tested this directly. Repeated use of non-stick pans at high temperatures increases how much of these compounds end up in your food. It's worth pausing here, because this is exactly the kind of finding that gets flattened into a scary headline. Not every study agrees. One earlier analysis, using a similar national dataset, found something surprising. One PFAS compound was actually linked to longer telomeres, not shorter ones. Telomeres are the protective caps on your chromosomes. We've talked about them before as a marker of cellular aging. That finding ran in the opposite direction researchers expected. The effect also changed depending on sex and reproductive stage. This isn't a case where the science points cleanly in one direction. The overall pattern, across many studies, leans toward harm. But the details inside that pattern are messier than a simple headline suggests. PFAS aren't the only household chemicals getting this kind of scrutiny. A second category comes from microplastics and nanoplastics. These are tiny plastic fragments. Some are small enough to be measured in millionths of a meter. Researchers have found them in human blood, in lung tissue, in placental tissue, even in breast milk. These particles are concerning for two reasons. First, on their own, they can trigger inflammation in lab studies. They can cause oxidative stress. They can cause cell death. Second, and maybe more importantly, they rarely travel alone. Microplastics act like tiny sponges. They absorb other harmful chemicals and carry them along. One example is bisphenol A, better known as BPA. Another is a class of chemicals called phthalates. Both are known as endocrine disruptors. That means they interfere with your body's hormone signals. Your endocrine system is a network of glands, thyroid, adrenal, reproductive organs. They communicate through carefully balanced hormone levels. Endocrine disruptors work by mimicking those hormones, or by blocking them. Either way, they send your body false signals. Researchers describe microplastics as a kind of slow-release delivery system. They leach these chemicals into your bloodstream gradually. Not all at once. Where do these particles actually come from at home? Plastic food containers, especially when microwaved, cash register receipts, which are often coated in BPA, plastic wrap, takeout containers, synthetic fabrics, which shed tiny fibers every time you wash them. None of this sounds alarming on its own. That's exactly the point. This isn't exposure to some rare toxic substance locked in a factory somewhere. It's low-level, constant exposure, built into an ordinary week. There's a fourth category worth naming. It's easy to overlook, but it's one of the most personal. It's what you put directly on your skin every day. Shampoos, lotions, deodorants, makeup. Many of these products contain phthalates too, the same endocrine disruptors mentioned earlier. Often they're hidden behind one vague word on the label, fragrance. That single word can legally cover dozens of undisclosed chemicals. Parabens are another common ingredient in personal care products. They've also been studied as weak endocrine disruptors. What makes this category different from cookware is frequency. Skin absorption happens daily, sometimes several times a day, across large areas of your body. And these products are often left on, not rinsed off. Researchers who study this note something striking. The daily chemical load from a personal care routine can sometimes rival or even exceed exposure from food, simply because of how many products the average person applies before leaving the house each morning. Before we get to the air itself, there's one more everyday category worth naming: household cleaners. Many all-purpose sprays and disinfectants contain a group of compounds called quaternary ammonium compounds, often shortened to quats. They're effective at killing germs. That's exactly why they're in so many products. But repeated exposure to quats has been studied for its links to respiratory irritation and disrupted immune signaling in animal models. Some older cleaning formulas also contain triclosan, an antibacterial compound that's been flagged by regulators in other contexts, including certain soaps, for its potential hormone-disrupting effects. None of this means cleaning your home is dangerous. Germs are a real problem, and disinfecting surfaces matters, especially in a kitchen or bathroom. The concern here is more about volume and frequency. Heavy daily use of harsh sprays in a small, poorly ventilated bathroom adds up differently than occasional use with a window cracked open. Simpler alternatives exist too. Plain soap and water handle most everyday cleaning just fine. Diluted vinegar and baking soda cover a surprising number of household tasks without adding another layer of synthetic chemical exposure to a home that's already absorbing plenty from other sources. The next category is the air inside your own home. Specifically, something called volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. These are chemicals that evaporate easily at room temperature. That means you can breathe them in without any visible sign they're even there. One revealing study measured what common air fresheners and scented candles actually release. On average, a single product emitted around 17 distinct VOCs. Roughly a quarter of those were classified as toxic or hazardous under federal standards. Many of these products also contain phthalates, the same chemicals riding along on microplastics. Some compounds in air fresheners react with ozone already in your indoor air. That reaction can form formaldehyde, a substance well known to irritate and damage respiratory tissue with repeated exposure. This category connects to the bigger aging story through a mechanism you've probably heard before on this channel: chronic, low-grade oxidative stress and inflammation. It's the same underlying process behind senescent cells, behind cardiovascular disease, behind nearly every major age-related condition researchers study. Environmental toxins don't need one dramatic mechanism to cause harm. Most of them work the same quiet way. They keep your body's stress and inflammation systems switched on, for years at a time. There's real evidence connecting this kind of exposure to a concrete aging marker, telomere length again. A long-running study out of Helsinki followed over 1,000 adults for a decade. Researchers measured their exposure to a group of chemicals called persistent organic pollutants. These accumulate in the body over time, much like PFAS, mainly through diet. Higher exposure to several of these pollutants was directly linked to shorter telomeres, and to faster telomere shortening over the following 10 years. A separate study followed older men over several years. It found that long-term exposure to black carbon, a byproduct of combustion common in traffic pollution and household smoke, was also linked to shorter telomeres. That last detail matters more than it seems. This isn't only a story about wealthy countries and their plastic packaging. In parts of the world where households still cook over biomass or solid fuel stoves, researchers found something troubling. Young children in those homes had measurably shorter telomeres than children in homes using cleaner cooking fuel. In one study, babies born to mothers using cleaner stoves during pregnancy had longer telomeres at birth than babies born to mothers using traditional open-fire cooking. This conversation isn't limited to one product category or one part of the world. It shows up in very different households, connected by the same underlying biology. One more category deserves a mention, mostly because it hides in plain sight for years at a time: furniture and carpets. Couches, mattresses, and carpet padding have often been treated with flame-retardant chemicals. Some of these compounds belong to the same broad families already discussed, including certain PFAS-related coatings used for stain resistance. Unlike a pan you might replace every few years, a couch or mattress often stays in a home for a decade or more. That means slow, steady off-gassing into household dust, which people, especially young children who spend more time on the floor, end up breathing in and absorbing through skin contact over long stretches of time. This isn't a category most people think to change quickly, and that's fair. Furniture is expensive, and replacing it just for this reason isn't realistic for most households. But when it does come time to replace an old couch or carpet, checking for untreated or low VOC options and vacuuming regularly with a vacuum that has a proper filter are reasonable, low-effort ways to reduce ongoing exposure from this particular source. So where does this leave you, standing in your own kitchen, looking at your own nonstick pan? The honest answer means avoiding two opposite mistakes. The first is dismissing all of this as overblown, pointing to one surprising telomere result and concluding there's nothing here. The second is swinging too far the other way, treating every plastic container and scented candle like an emergency. Neither response matches what the research actually shows. Here's the more accurate picture. Exposure to these compounds is now nearly universal. It shows up in the vast majority of people tested, and the overall pattern, across several separate lines of research, points the same direction. PFAS and epigenetic aging, microplastics and inflammation, personal care products and hormone disruption, VOCs and oxidative stress, persistent pollutants and telomere length. No single study proves that one specific product in your home is shortening your life. But taken together, the evidence makes a reasonable case. It's worth reducing unnecessary exposure where that's genuinely easy to do, without treating your house like a hazard zone. With that in mind, here are the changes with the strongest evidence behind them, roughly ordered from highest impact to easiest effort. Cookware is probably the best place to start. If your non-stick pans are old, scratched, or worn, consider replacing them. Stainless steel and cast iron are solid alternatives. This removes one of the most direct, repeated sources of PFAS exposure in a typical week. These compounds move into food more easily at high heat, exactly the conditions searing and frying create. Personal care products come next. This is partly because of how often and how directly they touch your skin. You don't need to empty your entire bathroom cabinet overnight. Start with what you use most, and leave on longest. Daily lotion, deodorant, leave-in hair products, choosing fragrance-free versions, or ones that list specific ingredients instead of a vague fragrance blend, captures much of the benefit. Without requiring a full routine rebuild, scented air fresheners and heavily fragranced candles are an easy category too. Occasional use isn't catastrophic, but they're one of the more concentrated, unnecessary sources of VOCs in a home. The alternative costs nothing. Open a window. Choose unscented options when you can. Food storage is a bit more nuanced. Plastic containers aren't dangerous just sitting in a cabinet. The risk climbs specifically when plastic gets heated. That includes microwaving food directly in plastic. It includes storing something hot right after cooking. Switching to glass or ceramic for reheating captures most of the benefit. You can still keep plastic around for cold storage if that's more practical. Receipts are a small, easy example of the same idea. Thermal paper is commonly coated in BPA. It transfers to your skin on contact. This isn't worth real anxiety. But skipping a receipt you don't need, or washing your hands after handling a stack of them, costs nothing. Cleaning products are worth a small adjustment too. You don't need to throw out every spray bottle under your sink, but for routine, everyday cleaning, simpler options work well. Soap and water, diluted vinegar, baking soda for scrubbing. Save the stronger disinfectants for the moments that actually call for them, like after handling raw meat or during an illness in the house, rather than reaching for them out of habit for every surface, every day. Furniture and carpets fall into the same lower urgency category as cleaning products. There's no need to replace a perfectly good couch out of caution. But the next time you're shopping for a mattress, a rug, or a piece of upholstered furniture, it's worth checking the label for flame retardant treatments or asking about low VOC options. It's a small decision, made rarely, that quietly reduces years of ongoing exposure once it's made. Ventilation might be the most underrated fix in this entire topic. Many of these compounds build up specifically because indoor air sits still. VOCs off-gassing from furniture, chemicals from cleaning products, particles tracked in from outside. Opening windows regularly, even briefly, helps. A basic air filter helps too. Both measurably reduce indoor concentrations of several pollutant categories over time. What's probably not worth your energy is chasing every possible source with equal intensity. You don't need an expensive air purification system. You don't need a full wardrobe of products labeled non-toxic. The research points toward cumulative, low-level exposure as the real concern. That means the right response is cumulative too. Small, sustainable changes. Not one big gesture, followed by going back to old habits a month later. There's a bigger point worth sitting with here. It connects to a theme this channel keeps returning to, from different angles. Aging research increasingly treats biological aging as more than one fixed countdown. It's the sum of many separate identifiable inputs. Some are biological, like senescent cells, or a slowing immune system. Some are environmental, like the chemicals quietly present in the objects around you every day. No single piece decides your fate on its own. But naming these pieces clearly, understanding where the evidence is strong and where it's still uncertain, is what lets you make reasonable decisions. Instead of either blind reassurance or unnecessary fear, your nonstick pan isn't a ticking time bomb. Your scented candle isn't secretly sabotaging your health every time you light it. But across a lifetime of ordinary choices, repeated thousands of times, in an ordinary home, the small decisions add up. What you cook with, what you put on your skin, what you breathe, what you store your food in. Together, they appear to leave a measurable mark at the cellular level. That's not a reason for alarm. It's simply one more piece of the aging puzzle, one worth understanding clearly. So you can decide, with real information instead of hype or dismissal, which small changes are actually worth making in your own home. If this changed how you think about the ordinary objects sitting around your house, subscribe. Until next time, take good care of yourself.